Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Bar Business Podcast, your ultimate resource for bar owners. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, and in today's episode, we are joined by Tanner Weston. Tanner, like a lot of folks in our industry, has a background in theater and acting, but also has risen through the ranks in the bar industry, behind the bar bartending, but also managing for some very large organizations. But the real reason we're talking today with Tanner is because he has a huge passion both for the history of liquor and cocktails and storytelling. And those are two things that we don't talk about much, but storytelling is key to providing a great guest experience, and knowing history can be a great way to really establish those stories and to provide guests with a little bit of a different experience and some extra knowledge that they wouldn't already have. So we're going to talk about acting and theater and how that gives him a unique perspective, but then also dive into how that's applicable and works in the bar business. So with that, Tanner, I'll go ahead and let you talk about your background a little bit too, because I'm sure there's a lot more there than what I just briefly went over.
As you had so kindly introduced me, my name is Tanner Weston. My bar background, or I guess service industry background, started mostly after college. I graduated UCLA for theater and then was doing a lot of odd jobs for the most part, working promotional gigs for radio stations, weird theater pickup work, a lot of as I like to call it, kind of nomadic journeyman jobs. And a friend of mine who I did theater with had a bartending job at Wood and Vine out in Hollywood. And from there, I was still doing a promotional gig through a radio station that no longer exists in LA. And he was saying that that Wood and Vine needed more barbacks. And at the time, I was just kind of making cocktails on my own in my house, more or less just hosting parties for friends and trying to make a fun and pleasant experience, especially after theater parties and, opening nights, closing nights, never see a night because it's constantly working. And so I went, did the barback stage. It was also during the time that Arcade Fire, I think, re-released Neon Bible or just released. So there was a huge party at the Capitol Records, and what was supposed to be like a 4-hour stage became a full, almost 10-hour shift because they just got dumped. And then in that period, I just did what was asked of me. I just kept going, busting glasses, doing dishes, resetting the bar, restocking things. And by the time 2, 3 in the morning rolled around, the bar manager's like, "The job is yours. If you want it, please don't leave." And I was like, "No, I definitely will take this. This is really cool." And cracked that first after shift beer, and sort of the interest there was set. So from there, what ended up happening was I proceeded to work my way up from bar back to bartender, which took an immense amount of time and a lot of a lot of back and forth, especially because becoming a bartender can kind of become a coveted experience. Like people want specifically a look, a brand, someone who already has years of experience becomes that. Just like acting, where it's like if you have no credits, if you have no bartending experience from another place, you probably won't get it. So I fought tooth and nail to go from barback to bartender, and then from there became bar lead, bar manager, and I went from Wood and Vine across the street to Lost Property, which is a fun little speakeasy on the corner of Hollywood and Vine. Cut my teeth there after Wood and Vine for a very, very long time, about 5 years, became their supervisor and lead and manager. And then I had a short-lived period at a place called Sora, which was a rooftop experience out and off of El Centro and Selma, if I'm not mistaken. Most of my period was a lot of the Hollywood area, and it was a fun, wild time. I mean, obviously being a bartender and a bar manager and your early to mid / getting into the late 20s was, the world was your oyster. You would see so many things, experience so many interesting people. Quite honestly, then the stories that would come of it. I mean, during that period, I was writing a lot. I had a lot of short stories, one-act plays, poems and things that I would either get published or start putting on because of these experiences with just the literal characters that you meet in this industry. And then from there, I had a little stint in downtown LA with Here and Now that's no longer with us. Was a tour guide for Live Spirits Distillery, which kind of mirrored and married that whole, storytelling in the industry together with theater and fun and avant-garde kind of wackiness. But then at the heart of it would be, of course, entire strong distillery behind it. I mean, the what Brian was doing, marrying his Burning Man and artistic aesthetics with making quality liquor, was actually something that I really, really enjoyed. And it's a shame to now find out that due to staggering COVID debts and moving out to Vegas, that they're no longer in business. It wouldn't have hurt if they sold more of their liquor, but from there, kind of kept floating about the city. For COVID, was going to be the Everbar at the Kimpton Everly Hotel, be their bar manager for Everbar, the Pool Bar, and J&Q, and then sadly COVID happened. From there, the last sort of anecdotes of my resume, if you will. Lincoln House out in West Covina has a lovely little speakeasy called the Utility Room that I kind of helped reestablish and direct and push forward. And then lastly, where I'm at currently is the Disneyland Hotel. I'm a guest experience manager at the Disneyland Hotel, and I oversee primarily all of the outlets, but my main focus would be the new Palm Breeze bar at the Discovery Tower. And then also we are redesigning the former Steakhouse 55 lobby lounge bar that's right now just called the Lounge into something new and unique that's going to be very, very exciting.
That sounds exciting. And it's interesting in your background, because not everyone has this, but I know a lot of the folks that are good in this industry do. The combination of kind of small business with big business, right? Because some of these folks you're talking about, they're no longer there because they're small little independents. But now, obviously, with Disney, that's one of the largest hospitality companies in the world.
Yeah, it is, it's wild, because my wife would say this a lot to me too, when I would, not necessarily complain, but just kind of bemoan the fact that, you work for mom and pops and they're great because they are willing to do whatever you want. Things can be fudged in any way. There's more of a camaraderie there, but it is always we're just going to kind of pay in exposure in a way. So again, still mirroring that lovely little bit of a theater where you work with mom and pops and you kind of cut your teeth, you get the experience, you create that family and familiarity, you create a good customer base that those guests now then maybe travel with you, whether they come to see you at the bar. But yeah, if you level up and you go extremely corporate, sure, there is now the money that you've been complaining about. Like, I'm not getting paid enough. Now they're like, how much do you want? We'll write you a check. But at the same token, there is so much more structure and rules and things that you were used to kind of improvising or flubbing or like, we'll fix it later. They're like, it needs to be done now. I need it 6 months in advance. Otherwise, why are we paying you? And, with that, like, that's a nice bit of security, but at what cost? In a way, the reason why I like our service industry is that it does mirror a lot of the theatrical arts, because it is an art in itself. Create experiences and create moments and memories for our guests. It comes with the cost of financial gain. Sometimes you go and you work at mom and pops and you can do the wildest things because you have carte blanche. But, if it still doesn't sell, it's why it's just for the art. When you go into the corporate world, it becomes, can we justify it? And if not to a wide blanketed commercial audience, then we're not going to take the risk. And that's where you kind of have to make those little sacrifices.
And so with that, as you talk about, storytelling can be different depending upon where you are. Now, I believe, as far as I know, most people that listen to this podcast are independent. So they have that more wide range ability in how they approach storytelling and guest experiences and all that. But I find a lot of places they have issues weaving storytelling into their steps of service. Right? We're all really good at saying, drop a drink, come back 2 minutes later, check on them, then get their food order, and then drop their food and come back 2 minutes later and check on them, right? Everybody in the business, independent or big corporate, we have that part now.
Yeah.
But where people have a lot of issues training their staff is how to tell a story, right? How do you make the guest's mood better? How do you impress the guest beyond just those simple, take a drink here, do this then, put this in the POS?
Yeah.
So, as you have managed different bars and restaurants, how do you approach the subject of storytelling with your teams? Because that's, again, not something that everyone in the industry is necessarily used to.
It's true. I mean, yeah, obviously, where I'm at now, storytelling is very paramount.
Mhm.
In that way, it's a little bit easier. Everyone's kind of a lot more willing, if you will, to get into the
Mhm.
storytelling aspect. In the places that I found it maybe a little more difficult, but then once have uh, earned the trust and the respect of the rest of the staff to go into it, I think it really has enriched not only their experience as bartenders, barback servers, what have you, but it's also really brought joy and value to the guest. The way that I usually go about it is, I mean, again, in the case of like over at Disney, Trader Sam's, it's literally a show. Like you go
Mm.
into the tiki bar, the Enchanted Tiki Bar, you order like a Krakatoa or an Oa or something like that, and there is a full-on button, things blow up, lightning and thunder, rain, you're getting hit with water, people are yelling and screaming, so of course people want to go to that show. But what I have found that by doing a lot of more of the speakeasy things, and I know that it was kind of a rampant trend with the emergence of craft cocktails and the discovery or the rediscovery, if you will, of, craft cocktails and mixology and what Dale Dagroff kind of reignited with, rediscovering Jerry Thomas's Bartender's Guide. In that way, I think speakeasies became a little bit easier to create that storytelling ambiance because initially, whether it was, something small in a back room that you just kind of opened a door and walked in, or as ornate as some friends of mine that have, the Obscura in downtown, where it is like a full thematic experience, much like Lost Spirits, where you make a reservation, you get like velvet lined invitations with secret codes, you have to walk down kind of maybe not so safe feeling streets and back alleys and rap on a door, or like PDT, you went into a phone booth and hit, called somebody, and then they would, more or less tell you where to go. You would show up, the doors discreet, everything. It creates an ambiance and it creates an adventure and a sense of an adventure that I think that as guests, want more out of their experience when they go out. I mean, we can all go to a restaurant and have an amazing dinner and great drinks, or we can all go to our favorite fast food or dive or what have you, and just have an amazing time. But I think that as we equate value, cocktails that are being sourced by natural ingredients and handmade and handcrafted, and they're going to be priced at, so high a value. I think that as we create a story or create the ambiance or the environment that allows people to fully immerse themselves into what we're creating, they're more appreciative or more understanding of where our price and value is at, because we have essentially led the trail of breadcrumbs to make it as exciting. We've given them hints and tastes the whole way so that by the time that they sit at the bar top or at the table with that server, they're already so enamored and so engrossed with what we're designing, what we're building, that when we do table touch for a second, drop that drink or drop menus and greet our friends, we greet them genuinely. We greet them, we get to know their names, we retain that information, we make them as personable, where the experience now is that you've come to a swanky bar, here's our swanky drinks, they're costing you an arm and a leg, watch me, shave ice with like 30 different katanas, and then drop a drink and walk away. And you're like, I mean, for the shock and awe of it, it's amazing. I mean, no one's going to be upset going to like Japan watching that dude chisel diamonds out of ice in the most dramatic way and light the bar on fire. But I would also argue, if that spot wasn't as tight and tiny as it was, and it felt like that show was so personal to you, if you were at like table 57 in the back corner near kind of the bus station, would you still have that same experience? Would you still have that feeling like, yeah, I'm spending $40 for entrees, I'm spending 30 something for apps and another, 20 plus on cocktails. Does it equate? And so I've tried to get my cast or my staff, depending on where I'm at, to understand that people are coming here not only to drink drinks and escape and all that, but we must build the escapism. We must build the vacation. And if we are more or less, I like to call it, doing the dance behind the bar. I mean, I look like an octopus because of how my fluidity of movement and grabbing my tools and bottles becomes the show. as I talk to my guests and I kind of weave them into the experience, and I'm grabbing tools and I'm understanding their flavor profiles, I'm understanding what they like to drink, what they don't like to drink, because I think that's the biggest sort of pratfall, is that we immediately just try to push things on people that they don't know what they want. But if I'm immediately engaging with that guest, figuring out who they are, asking what they're interested in, what are their favorite flavors, what are their favorite spirits, I can easily work them into the menu that's already created, which makes all our lives easier. But it feels less of like I'm gonna either read you the menu or point to a drink and say that's what you want. It feels personal. It feels like we've created this adventure together. And by the time I'm done creating this cocktail, it feels uniquely their own. Even if it is like a gin gimlet or a last word or a hanky panky or whatever, at the end of the day, we've discussed this in such a way that it feels like I know what they were expecting or what they wanted from this experience and have crafted it for them. And when they take that first sip or that first bite, if it's food, it's always that bliss of like, yeah, oh, this is, thank you so much. And I think that's the best way of how we can incorporate that storytelling, because it can be as personal as just figuring out who those people are and explaining a little bit about yourself and creating that familiarity. Or it can be as thematic as going to something like the obscure or a speakeasy and creating more nuanced dialogue or even dialects. Obviously I wouldn't be like, yeah, you're going to go up to like Long Beach and there's this fun Irish bar and they just do sing-song Irish accents. I would argue that if, you're going to, in this example, like a really authentic, like Irish pub tavern feel and vibe, I'd want the smells and the food and the environment to echo that same feeling as if I walked into like, Dublin or any like true Irish bar out in Ireland. And not to say that they have to speak in accents, but if those bartenders look and feel and explain cocktails and drinks in the same way that it feels like as if I'm transported there, that's where storytelling really creates that win.
One of the things that I noticed as you were talking there was a lot of this comes down to creating essentially an immersive experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because to your point, a cocktail is a cocktail, right? An old fashioned, it may be a little bit better here, a little bit worse there. They might use a better whiskey or a better bourbon, or they might tweak it this way or that way, but it's still just an old fashioned.
Yeah.
What people are paying for is more than that drink. They're paying for the experience.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to me because as you talk through that, and you don't see this much, or I don't hear people describe it much, but rather than look at it as steps of service or a business concept or anything, you're really looking at it as an immersive guest experience. And how can we make that immersive guest experience work for our guests and improve their time with us? And so obviously Disney makes it easy. Speakeasies make it easy. But now let's just say I am the neighborhood bar on the corner outside the city, a little bit in the suburbs, right? Like, and because that's most of the bars in the US are probably that.
Yeah.
And they don't have a cool way to get in. They don't have anything like that. Where do you think a bar like that could try to weave in some of this storytelling and immersive experience?
I think I would say the easiest and the biggest win there would be to honor and soak up as much of its surrounding area. Like if we are honoring our local heroes, honoring our local sports teams, if we are creating that true home bar where it's like we are of the neighborhood, because I mean that's always the biggest fight too when you're establishing your own bar and restaurant or just a bar. You're going to have that pushback from the community that's going to say, how is this going to benefit our area? Because obviously you're bringing sin and vice, you're bringing in, alcohol that is going to inevitably have fights or, drunk driving, because, there is a correlation that as bars and restaurants come into areas that they do studies about how property value decreases because there's a rise in vagrancy, there's a rise in what have yous. So I would say if the way to win that storytelling element within a small like neighborhood local kind of eatery dive or maybe a little more upscale, but just still the neighborhood watering hole, is to be of the neighborhood, is to let the neighbors know that this is your community as well, and you won't stand for that kind of riffraff. You won't stand for that way. The things that we are trying to create here are the like in line with the neighborhood. And I think that, you know, when you get that on board as the main through line, as like the story and the theme, you get the staff to start understanding it too, and they start protecting the place and start protecting the neighbors, the locals that continue to come in every day, like your regulars. They're the ones that when, you know, you have creepy patrons hitting on women that don't want to be hit on and trying to buy drinks, that you now have a bar staff that kind of comes in and goes like, yo, Steve, I need you to go. Like, you have people now taking pride in what they are representing, because again, the story becomes less of, we're at, you know, it's a bar down off of, you know, 4th and Main, or like off of Cherrybrook or whatever. You know, now it's like, you know, that's like Mama Sal's. That place is the best. I mean, we've hosted Little League games there because they've got great pizza or whatever, great beer on tap. It's all local and fresh. They work with by creating that, you know, then your staff is sitting there going like, this is a home. This is a forever home for a lot of people, whether some come in, kind of put their hat up, work, and then come out and go. You know, more often than not, you're going to have people that are going to set up, you know, stakes for a long, long time. And especially if they're, you know, working in that kind of environment, that storytelling, your guests that come in every day become more and more regular. The locals recommend it all the time because now it is a place of business that brings business to the city or to the area. You know, you would see the pendulum shift and swing into the opposite realm where, you know, a bar might bring down property value, a bar might bring down the cultural morale of the area. Now it's swinging up where more people want to invest in the area because it is so well maintained and so captained. There is a thirst and a hunger here that can be capitalized by diversifying, you know, spaces more to incorporate more restaurants, more bars and relaxation spots. Because I think that, you know, what gets lost is obviously in big cities, we create experiences by building restaurants for people to go out to be seen, to be, it's whether the food is good or not, it's like you go out to be seen. So for your local neighborhood area, it should be more about welcoming everyone in. Like, we're all a part of this community. You always have a spot at this table. You always have a you know, a voice to be heard. And by doing that, I think realistically, that sort of storytelling and immersion becomes the cornerstone of what makes a long-term business.
I couldn't agree more. That was really well stated, by the way, as well. Now, one thing too that I was thinking about is that there are a lot of folks, and really myself included. Before I got into the bar business, I was not necessarily the most extroverted person in the world, right? And so you're out there, you have to interact with people, you need to tell stories, and you need to really manufacture this immersive experience for folks. But do you have any tricks from, say, the acting side of things that people that are not used to being that forward or not naturally extroverts can latch on to help them create this more immersive experience?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm just being glib about it, like, take a couple of shots. But no, but in all seriousness, like from a theater standpoint, yeah, I get it. I'm a very gregarious, boisterous person. My brother would always say it's like, it's just easy for you. I'm like, it's not. I would argue that, you know, theater people, though we are the most like showy and out there, we are probably the most anxious, insecure, and frightened things. And so we make a lot of large movements and banging sounds as a way to kind of be like, avoid me, don't look over here. It's very like the man behind the curtain, if you will. But from a theater standpoint, some ways to kind of ease, you know, talking to guests or pulling information out without it feeling like an interrogation really stems a lot from, you know, improv. And I would argue that anyone with some time, go take some improv classes. You don't have to be great at it. You don't have to, you know, aspire to be one. But I think what the service industry and hospitality has a lot of similarities with theater and improv is that it is based on like a yes and concept. I mean, nothing kills hospitality or a scene more than if someone's like, Can I get like a Guinness and no? Okay, well, why not? Just no. We're out. Okay. Can I get then this burger? No, well, that's 86. Do you have anything today? Like, or is it just so those are those things in which, if we're saying yes and like, hey, can I get a pint of Guinness and a shepherd's pie? Definitely gonna get you the Guinness. We have that. The shepherd's pie, unfortunately, is only a Sunday option. It allows you to stay, easy and colloquial. You don't have to be like weaving a giant story, but by just doing the simple thing of yes anding, like hearing someone's complaining, going, fully understand, totally get it. We are having some kitchen troubles at the moment. Like, if we're bringing in our clientele into what's happening without it being like a 5 alarm fire, like they don't need to know, like, well, the power's out and the kitchen is unoperable or whatever. And they don't need to know that. We can at least give, just a simple like, hey friends, so sorry. I know it's taking a little while. The kitchen is a little bit backed up. But is there anything I can do in the meantime? Grab you another cocktail, freshen anything up. That becomes more of just, we're asking them what they need, and it becomes more of a conversational piece. In the improv world, obviously, then we start skewing into comedy, because what's the better way to deal with trauma than to laugh it off? That's always my go-to. So sometimes that gets me into trouble. I can be very sarcastic at times when I shouldn't be, but that is how I deal with it. When I'm like, well, this is weird. I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to say a lot of funny things, and hopefully you don't remember that this was awkward. You don't have to go that route, but if that's how your personality, kind of hews towards, use it. That's what's helped me when, there's some guest issues or things are going through. It's also a way to soften the blow of someone's cards being declined. We can very easily come like, hey, so sorry, friends. Do you happen to have something else? This is just not going through. It might just be your bank. You know what? Yeah. Or if they're like, hold on, make some phone calls. Yeah, no worries. Take your time. Obviously, now we're watching them, but it's still one of those things where if we are listening to our guests, if we are actively responding and not trying to premeditate an answer. You don't have to be the loudest, biggest thing in the room. You could be the softest, quietest thing that provides the most excellent service, because it is more intimate. You do come in and just go, and what is it that you guys need today? Well, how can I help you? For sure. We have many, many options like that. And then again, you just fall back on what you're most comfortable about. Speaking about the menu, what are in the drinks. You know how that food is prepared. You know how we serve, deliver, and everything, like every aspect of that menu. So bring yourself into have that confidence to bring yourself back to those moments as like kind of a strong ground, and then build that relationship from there. Like at first you're walking up to a table or a new bar patron, it's intimidating. It's like, I don't know what they're like. Drop your menus, welcome in. How's everything today? Any cool things you guys have going on? It just had blah, blah, blah. I understand traffic is miserable. When I was coming here, the worst thing. Like, and now we are creating that story. Now we're creating that environment where there's dialogue and we're listening to each other. And now that person that may have come in kind of angry and upset is having that beer, drinking that cocktail, having those French fries or whatever, and they're starting to relax. We're providing the escape that they sought. It's been a hard day at work. I just want to come to my local, suburban bar that's just up the street from my house and just sit there. John, another taxing day? God, you would not believe, like it becomes easier when we just have the simplest of conversations and continue that yes and, instead of just me like, I don't want to talk to that guest. My day is terrible. I don't want to say anything. When we go into things with that no mentality or just kind of short answer mentality, it stops the story from growing. But if we're open to listening to where it goes and ask questions on it, then that conversation, that sort of extroverted nature becomes naturally. Like even introverts are able to hold a conversation with their friends and family without it feeling strained or whatever. So if we do the same with our guests, they feel more intimate, and we are like creating that story.
That's a lot to think about right there. Because as you were talking, I'm not taking notes because we're doing a podcast, but as we're talking, I'm like, I just wanted to write down a bunch of things. But let's pivot a little bit, because one of the ways that I know you like to tell stories, especially because of your speakeasy type background,
Mm,
is getting into history
yes.
and really exploring why cocktails are what they are, how things have developed over time. Because I think for a lot of us, we don't necessarily always think every day, okay, why is a gin and tonic a gin and tonic? Why do we put egg whites in drinks? Like there are a lot of these things that we do that we don't necessarily ever think about. Why did this happen? So I'll kind of let you go wherever you want on this one, but let's just kind of dive into the history of booze.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's why I do what I do is because as a history nerd and sort of buff, I guess, it really informs a lot of my storytelling. The reason why
Mhm.
I enjoy theater and storytelling is because history is just that. It is his story, whether you can take that in a positive context or a negative context. It is the fact that there is a life and a longevity to what we have created, and everything, whether it be cocktail or a bottle of spirit, has a story to tell and has a time and place. And that's what really got me involved. So when I started as a bar back, I was very, very confused and kind of like, how does anyone know these drinks? How does anyone just look at a bottle and go, I can make 13 cocktails out of this? How do you look at liqueurs and go, that tastes like this and this is how it's made? And so my bar sensei, my bar senpai, if you will, who finally noticed me, was like, if you don't know what something tastes like, if you don't know where it comes from or how it's made or smells or looks, it is on you to drink all of these bottles and figure that out. I'm not saying go get drunk at work, but I am saying that take the time to taste all these things and write notes, research them, and figure that part out. And then it will kind of open up to you. And so I took that very, very literally. And for a long period of time at Wood and Vine, I would start my shift from one end of the back bar and just to have little tipples out of 3 or 4 bottles and then stop for the night and continue that for the next, 3 years. I would just research all these back bar bottles, research all these liqueurs, taste everything. That's how I got to taste the entire Pappy line, by the way. But I was able to then start to understand how things are made and where that goes. And I would also, if it's not too much of a shameless promotion, say Bar Smarts is a great resource for this. Their extensive historical knowledge from like David Wondrich really, really helps sell this. When I look at cocktails or when I look at bottled spirits, I'm looking more or less at a historical time capsule that talks about the social, political, and economic environment of its time, the fashion trends, the artistic trends, the sort of joie de vivre, if you will, of that period. When you look at things like like rum. I mean, it's summer and rum's fun. Rum, what I love about rum is that it is a cultural melting pot of ideas and
Mhm.
experimentation and stories because it spans all over the place. As much as people would love to believe that whiskey is America's spirit, I mean, it has become so, especially because I would argue that you could say that full heartedly because it is the truest of the American experience. Whiskey being
Mhm.
made in the original 13 colonies was predominantly rye. Not until we had the Irish and Scottish immigration and Manifest Destiny movement west do we have much more push into that. So again, story of immigrants coming to America, starting their own farms, starting their own places of business, and using their own historical context and stories and recipes from families of old, or how we are creating the bourbons that we love today. The Irish immigrants that sought to make something new and unique in America, but use what they brought with them from the old country is uniquely American. But before all that, I mean, the Americas were a were a sugar plantation. We were
Mhm.
essentially a refining factory for the entire Caribbean coast, and we would, just like Jamaica and Ghana and all the Caribbean areas that just had a large surplus of fermented molasses. We were pushing that back off to the kingdom and had all this stuff hanging out. We were in love with rum. And we, like, the North American colonies were the biggest rum drinkers, to the point that by the time we became our own country, I mean, George Washington ordered, I think it was like 25 kegs of Barbadian rum because, quote, it's the good stuff. So I mean, right there, it's like that's such a rich history to understand that, like, what was that story? What, looking at I know Boston has Privateer that does more traditional American style rums. You have Oni's in New York making American style rum. You even have out here in Pasadena areas, you've got Stark Spirits making American style rum. That's going to taste uniquely different than Jamaican, than Barbadian, than Ghanan, Puerto Rican, Cuban, etc. And in that way, though they all have similar things, like, yes, it is all rum, but it's telling an entirely different story. It's showing a different political environment, a different societal environment, economic, artistic. And I feel like every time I open a bottle like that or create a drink using those spirits and creating that new story, that new experience, I'm understanding where it's come from, and I'm able to create something new to show where we're going to go with it. And I think that's also, for me at least, like some of the most exciting aspects of craft cocktails, of mixology, if you will, bartending, is that we are stewards and custodians of a rich history, of a more or less wonderful and dynamic living history that changes rapidly. But in creating these cocktails, we are able to bring them back to life. We are able to make our guests experience something that for a time could only be experienced back then. And I know as practices and health things and all that sort of changes, is it the truest form of the experience? Like, case in point, the argument of the Ray and Nephew 17 year, the illustrious holy grail of the Mai Tai rum. That's what Trader Vic made it with. That's what we drank it until it went extinct. So yes, everyone hunts down to recreate that bottle, to redesign that experience. But I would argue that by understanding those flavor profiles, understanding what Trader Vic was doing, and using new product that has a harken back to the flavor profile, we are able to honor what was, build on what is, and create what will be. And in that way, we are creating sort of a living time capsule where everyone that comes to that bar can transport themselves, whether you're, a Peaky Blinders fan and you're like, oh, I just feel like I'm there with Thomas Shelby. Or if you're just like a normal person thinking like, I wonder if this is how it felt to go to a bar during the 20s, during the speakeasy era, where, flappers and the nightlife were wild. And you can almost take yourself back, in this transformative property when you imbibe these things and you hear how these things are made and you understand how, like, who makes them and why they made them, and then you sip this drink and it pulls you into that. It's for me, it is such a unique experience in that way.
It is, and to me, one thing that's always struck me about the history of booze in relation to the history of America is, if you, and I'm sure you've done this before, but like if you dig into the alcohol requisitions by the Continental Congress, those guys were drunk all day, every day.
Oh yeah.
Right. You look at America was founded by a bunch of drunk guys that hung out in bars. Right. Like, and that's probably some people will not like that I said that, but that is a historical fact.
Yes.
Right. And our first, there was a rebellion. The only time a president has ever led troops into battle was George Washington leading troops into battle against some guys in Pennsylvania because they didn't want to pay tax on their whiskey.
Yep.
Right. So much of our early history is about booze.
Yeah.
And then as you were brought it forward, and obviously I'm in the 1920s.
Yeah.
The whole 20th century essentially was formed by booze and crime that went along with it, and the lifestyle and the culture that we have kind of brought back in.
Yep.
To your point. But thinking through all that, is there any particular story or a particular brand or particular cocktail that stands out to you as having a really cool history, or something that you just like to talk about with history?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say one go-to is, obviously people love egg whites. People love egg whites, as much as they love fire on a cocktail. But I think that the stories that's most fascinating is when people try to figure out what the difference between a New York sour or an egg white sour are. Traditionally, most people are going to go for the egg whites, but then when they see the New York sour, like, well, why are you floating red wine on this? Like, why is there red wine and not egg white? And the idea is that, before refrigeration, to have raw eggs in a cocktail in the city where you don't know how clean it is, I mean, you're asking for salmonella. You're asking for a bad day.
Yeah.
But if you're, at the local tavern that grandma's farm is out back, and you're able to cultivate those fresh eggs and crack fresh, like raw eggs, you have less chance of getting sick. And now it's more of a fun delicacy. And so the reason why our New York sour uses claret or, red wine as opposed to an egg white is that it was more sanitary for us to float more booze in your cocktail than it is using egg white. And this, like, case in point, this, from a religious standpoint of like Jesus turning water into wine, it is an actual healthy fact. The aspect of washing wine with water was the wine alcohol was killing the bacteria in the water so that you could drink water and not die. So that alone, it's like, it's not, it's not divine miracle or magic or what have you. It is literally science of, if I pour some alcohol into this water that I need to hydrate myself with, I will kill bacteria so I can drink my water. But then that's why you have throughout history where, children were drinking beer and wine with their parents because that's what allowed them to drink water. They weren't drinking to get drunk. They were drinking just to sterilize it. And so it's those little, like, kind of historical tidbits that, we learn so much through modern medicine because of the fact that at one point we decided to take fermented alcohol and vegetables and fruit and imbibe on it. And though the effect became a relief for the burdens of the world, the simple medicinal aspect is that it made people live longer. Food was sanitized, water was palatable and able to be drank. There was so much more that could be, pickled and saved by the creation and drinking of alcohol than ever before. And then only after did, with refrigeration and modern technology and science, that's, to your point, yeah, our history is heavily washed with drinking. I mean, the first seal for your protection is the Bottled in Bond Act. It literally was like, don't moonshine, stop killing people. We'll give it to you tax free. You only pay taxes on the bottle sold. So let's just do that. And people were like, okay, sounds legit. And we wrote that in the Constitution. That's why we have what the recipe for bourbon and rye is because we were that drunk that we're like, we don't want people to die anymore. Let's write it in. This is the recipe. If you do it anything else, it's not called bourbon. It's not called rye. You can call it American whiskey. You can call it whatever. Those are those stories that I find to be the most fascinating.
And I'm right there with you because it's you cannot separate, at the end of the day, you cannot separate any piece of human history from the history of alcohol.
Yeah.
And again, I know that annoys a lot of people, but it's not true to think otherwise, right? I mean, and you can go all the way back to the Romans who drank a lot of wine, which I don't know if you've ever looked at what Roman wine is. It's probably very vile. And it kept them alive because, to your point, it wasn't the nasty water.
Yeah.
But they also sweetened it with lead, so that's why they all went crazy when they got old. So there's, might make more sense.
Just trying to live my life,
right? But I think that's really important, though, for everybody, and especially getting back to the context of storytelling, that we have stories about our products to tell people.
Yeah.
Because I think, to tie it in also with what we were talking about with introverts, if you're introverted, you don't want to talk about yourself. You don't want to necessarily do any of that. But you can talk about history of something without it being about you or personal or scary, really. And so I think that kind of wraps us up for the day. But did you have anything else you wanted to talk about or anything you wanted to add to any of the conversation that we've had?
I would just say that whether you have established a bar in your life or looking to do so or anything, that as much as it is a business that needs to be run, as much as it needs to be a game of balance and checks and all that stuff, don't forget that, why you want to do it is because you want to tell your story, whether it's through your food that you're a chef that you want to create and serve to people, or whether you're a bartender that wishes to just have a place to escape with friends at the end of the day. Everything comes back to, in our industry, is that simple aspect of escapism, storytelling, and hospitality. And it's all synonymous. And so that if we are telling our story truthfully and vulnerably, we will succeed far more, financially in the long run than we would if we just focus on numbers. So that'd be the thing I'd end on the most, is that storytelling is inherently the cornerstone of hospitality.
Yeah, that is a great spot to end our conversation. So, Tanner, I have to say thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you.
This has been a very engaging conversation, and like I was telling you before we even started recording, something different, because these guys are used to me yelling about numbers.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about stories and history and stuff that's a lot more fun than, did you make a profit?
Yeah, right.
Why didn't you make a profit? Right? So again, thank you for being here.
Of course.
And for everybody listening, that will wrap us up for today. If you enjoyed things, make sure you like, subscribe, leave a review. There are links in the show notes for the Bar Business Nation Facebook group, where we're bringing bar owners together, as well as to talk to me for a strategy session if you want to. And with that, guys, I hope everyone has a great day, and we will talk again later.